Welcome back to another SuperCoach video with me, JD. You're joining me for the round 10 review, where we have once again dropped rank. We scored a 23-7 this week, which about a 30,000 round rank, and drops me down to 3,600. And honestly, a little bit surprising because I didn't feel like I had a particularly bad week, but I think I know where I went wrong. My trades this week I felt were pretty good for the most part. We'll go through those as well as what's coming on for this week. But yeah, I think just looking at my team, like obviously Baker out a second week hurt, McKercher out, that hurt. Really was just down to the one playing bench player in Clark this week who scored a 15, so that's pretty neat. Not good for the cash gen really, but McAuliffe came back for the 62, that's good. But yeah, I think it's just like lack of ceiling scores. There are a lot of players that went really big this week that were, fairly popular, and I just didn't really own any of them. So Marshall traded him out back-to-back 160s. That's pretty brutal. Zork I traded in this week, so the 161 was appreciated. But yeah, I mean, Luke Jackson nearly 40% owned, and I know this isn't representative of everyone, but 154. LDU at least somewhat popular on the chord. Houston pretty popular as well. Harley Reid, who I traded out this week, 138. Rao, pretty popular, 128. So yeah, I don't know, just like I didn't have some of these big scores that others seemed to get this week. Combined with probably playing an extra couple of rookies and what I would like to with McKercher and Baker out, and it leads to just a little bit of a drop. So as I mentioned, my trades last week in the end were pretty much what I discussed. I went Roberts and Reid out, and for my ins, I got Zorko and Fisher, which, turned out to be pretty good. And I think that's probably always the hardest part when you trade in a 161 and a 116 in the same week and drop rank. That's pretty good sign of where your team's at and how your season's going, which is the wrong way. People keep telling me it's not too bad. You ranked, 2K, 3K, but when your trend is the wrong direction, and of course the trend is your friend, but not for me this year. So yeah, rough. All right, and then, we'll go through the scores, I guess, but defense held up well. Obviously, yeah, no Houston, as I mentioned, was probably the big score that I missed here. And then Closey having a field at 49, really not ideal. That is where someone like a McKercher coming in and dropping a 90 or 100 would have been a pretty big difference. But yeah, I guess like Dacos is a consideration probably every week for VC at the moment. Started out that game very strong and faded a bit, but yeah, like he's been traveling well. Ryan, maybe a little bit disappointing, honestly. The 122 given the opposition. I ended up passing on his VC and going Gone. I originally had it on Butters, but just got convinced that maybe Gone was a better play, and lost 13 points over Ryan and 18 points over Butters. But it's rats and mice considering the rest of the team and where it's headed at the moment. Martin and Sheasel are the interesting ones from role position change perspectives. Martin played a bit of time forward in the second half, and Sheasel was obviously in that on-ball role, but I want to say he was moved more behind the ball, or at least got to go into defense more with his running, play less of that half forward once Bergman did the hamstring. So I think once McKercher's back, Shiz will be back on ball, and ultimately his scoring will drop a little bit. But as someone that held, taking a 117, pretty happy with that. I think those that were in the fortunate position to still have a boost or whatever and trade him out probably got unfairly punished on that one. I think it's probably going to end up being a good move. I think there's enough other good options in defense. In the midfield here, so yeah, Butters was good, continues to kind of carry that midfield, probably one of my better starting picks in the end. Bont has been, just disappointing week from Bont. Disappointing. Disappointing. I think he'll probably disappoint against the Swans as well, if I'm being perfectly honest. I'm not looking forward to this Thursday night game. Merritt got a little bit of attention, but defensive work rate, kicked a goal, kind of salvaged a score, but he's getting definitely cheaper for those that were hoping to jump on. I want to believe that against Richmond this week, he can kind of put together a pretty good score and start that trend back the other way. Dawson was good, still played too much forward for my liking. When he's had his big fourth quarters, they're getting him in behind the ball or on the ball, not forward of it. It'll be interesting to see how they change the side with Rankine doing his hamstring as well, and whether Dawson picks up more CBAs, whether they give them to like a Rochelle type, or who knows. Oliver looks good. Picked him up last week. I think pretty content with that. He's more. I mentioned last week he was getting more of that second handball from stoppage, so the receiving the first one. This week he was in the coalface winning out themselves and just translates to extra contested possessions and points to the Supercoach format. So from a fantasy perspective, I think he scored slightly worse this week, but ended up with a plus 30, on Supercoach compared to last week. So just moving back into that right spot, I think he's building nicely. Probably not going to be the Oliver at old, but for the sub 400k price we paid, pretty happy with that. Green, bit of a disappointing week after starting out strong. If you don't own him, I think you probably don't bring him in this week. You just wait one more, but then bring him in post buy for 500k, which is an absolute steal for Green, honestly. Fife didn't get to watch this game, but the 63 no good, and then McAuliffe I didn't get to watch that game, but the 62 I will take as well. He played and made money, which is good. Clark, so much hope after he came back and scored that 78 that there would be some money in him, but it's just not the case. It's not the case. He's just a dead M11. Please play through the buys, please. In the ruck line, gone the last 3 or 4 weeks. Rucks have been putting up pretty big scores against West Coast. So I thought Gorn was probably due solo rucking, even though his history wasn't particularly great against them. Solo rucking, I thought he might end up all right, but it just didn't come together. He had a really poor first quarter, and I thought Melbourne would get on top of West Coast with contested possessions, clearances, without Yo in the side, with Oliver looking a little bit better, with Petrarca fundings and fallen last week. It just didn't happen. Did not happen at all. Bit concerning. I wonder how they fix that, because losing to West Coast is, I think, a pretty big shot in their grand final hopes, I would say. So probably a worthy risk, but this didn't pan out. Oh, I didn't even really touch on it, but Butter's last quarter was one of the best last quarters, and obviously like crazy finish that game. So just really cool. And then English 91. Yeah, like I'm not going to bring it up. I put it on Twitter for those that are interested to go out and have a look. But I had a look at what my R2 average has been for the year, and I've made 3 trades, and I've averaged 86. So I started with Grundy, bringing in Marshall, then bringing in Sweet, and then bringing in English. English's average is 112, Marshall's average is 113, Grundy's is like 108. So I've lost somewhere between like 120 and 240 points and 3 trades versus if I just picked any of those and just held them for that whole period. So really frustrating. My ruck 2 position has been an absolute disaster this year. At this point, I'm just going to keep holding. Marshall's a great price for those that are looking for an R2, but I think it just lay in the bed that I've made. Conway's an interesting option as well, depending on what we hear about Stanley this week and where he's at. He's now up at a more awkward price, 240k, same price as Sweet, but yep. Forwards, all right, so Heaney good, Flanders good. Same as every week, no new notes, they're good. If you don't have them, they're worth getting. Zorko is obviously the addition here, so made 50k, put up a 161. Shame I didn't get to watch the game and the piggery in action. It's actually better than what he did 2 weeks ago. So, really good. Really happy with that. Hawks this week, Western Bulldogs, Saints. I think we pointed out on the FTTV pod just how nice that fixture is for the Lions. So, we'll ride that. It's just one more game now until the bye, so you don't really expect that he's going to get rested. I think it is a tricky spot, both him and Fisher, for people that didn't bring them in this week. And maybe we'll talk about trades in a second, but they've both got just 1 week until their bye round now. At the same time, Fisher's break-even 0, and the roll is nutso. Hawks, Zorko's break-even 78. So they're both going to go up pretty significant money. Is the money that you gain by going on them now worth them being on buy the next week? Now, I think like next week's buy is pretty easy for a lot of people to manage, but like, is it worth it? I think the answer will come down to like, what's your other trade this week? Because if it's like Fisher or Sexton, I think I'd rather just go like Fisher. Like, price points are different and all that type of stuff, but I think I'd rather just go Fisher and like miss on Sexton. Fisher's on buy next week, but you end up with a better side for the run on the way home. So look, if it's them or a bad option, basically I'd pick them. But if you have 2 good options, I probably aren't picking the player that's going on by next week, which would be Fisher, Zorko. So tricky, but obviously pretty happy with that trade in, despite it meaning that I lost Harley Reid, who put up a 136, I want to say. ended up making his break even. So we were so worried about him losing cash, and he went, um, lost $100, and his break even's now 59, and he's going to go back up money. I think people will ask, can you trade him back in? I don't think so. I still don't think West Coast's going to win that many games. Kind of caught Melbourne by surprise here. I mean, they could beat Adelaide. They could beat the Saints. They could beat North. Honestly, and they could beat Essendon in the rematch. They were competitive with us. Maybe he could do more, but like, yeah, I'm not. Oh, he's 443K for a rookie that's playing a lot of forward time. I'm not going there. But crazy good. Oh, some of the highlights from Harley Reid today, like the burst out of the middle and then three bounces, kicking the long goal. If you haven't watched some of that stuff, it's nuts. He also did a double fend off this week to Oliver and Petrarca. Like, just crazy good highlights already from Harley Reid. All right, the rookies this week in the forward line really held up their end of the bargain in Wilson, Darcy, and Dempsey. And great because I was forced into the fielding a lot of these. I didn't end up having a lot of decisions as much as I would have liked to have looped them. So, these are pretty handy scores. I think really it's Fife and McAuliffe where I must have lost points over people. Bit of closey. Like, it's probably 30, 40, 50 points through each of these. That adds up to 100. That'll be it, right? But yeah, so sorry, these three all went really well, and it's once again tricky position now. I'll have a look. Oh, Wilson's break even's up in the 70s. Okay, so I actually do have someone I can trade this week. But yeah, I feel like I'm in a bit of a difficult position looking at these players because a lot of them are okay to field. No one really needs to be moved on, and they've all been putting up good scores. So I'm actually surprised Wilson's break even 76. Did he have a bad game in the middle? Because he's gone 126, 90, 75, and he's still got a break even of 76. Definitely possible to beat that, but I think I'm going to need to move someone out. So Wilson looks a likely target. Darcy's still got a low break even of 16. Dempsey's got a decent one. This matchup's hard, although GWS have been a little bit weaker the last couple of weeks, so maybe this is okay to hold. And then we're hoping Baker comes back this week. If he misses a third week because of a cork, I'd be distressed. I can only imagine how Tigers fans feel with the state of their injury list at the moment. But yeah, need him back to play against Essendon. Stand on merit and learn from the best, I reckon. Just go blow for blow with him. We'd like that, Baker. So, look, let's just hit a little bit of optimize. To see what's going on. And we're going to hit up trades now. So let's talk quickly about philosophy and then I'll look at my trades. I have not taken a peek whatsoever. That's why I'm like looking at these break-evens going, oh, Wilson, okay, there's someone I could actually get rid of. Fife I could probably get rid of as well, but I think it probably makes more sense to hold Fife now that he's already lost his money. And yes, I did realize that with 90k in the bank, I could have traded Fife over Reed last week. Would I have ever done that? Probably not. Like, I think you just always hold the mid-pricer, proven form of premium over the rookie, but oof, that's a sliding doors moment. So philosophy this week, what do we want to do? So obviously set ourselves up for the buy still, I think is pretty important. So if you haven't been, you should be checking these buys. I think I'm in a decent spot. Like, yeah, next week I'm missing 2 from defense, 2 from the middle, 2 from the forward line, something like that. Very easy to cover. Round 13, 1 from each line, so that's very easy to cover. I probably need an extra one there. This is where having a like a Young or a Houston type in defense or a Sarong type in the middle or even a Horn Francis would be quite handy. Just having another one of those just help with the buys. Round 14, we're having a look at that. This buy is looking pretty dicey at the moment. I mean, these are 3 rookies that I'm missing here, so really it's just the 1 premium. And in the middle, like, yeah, 3, and then it's a rookie. I mean, Flanders goes forward, missing work. That's not too bad. I mean, yeah, buys are going to be easier this year just because of how they're spread out. That doesn't look too bad either. But just make sure you're looking and considering these as well as you're doing your trades. Make sure you're not overloading. I think the biggest risk is probably like this round 14 buy where you've got Gold Coast, Essendon, and the D's. I think that's probably the easiest one to fall into the trap of. But just, be wary of that. So after auto shuffling, it hasn't put Baker on field, which is pretty nice. And I guess it makes sense because he is injured. Now, let's have a bit of fun. We haven't hit this button on stream, but we've got the old trade assist going. And it is suggesting, thanks to Bloodstone, Tasmania, Australia, 1870, that we trade out Dawson for Sam Berry. Now, that is astute trading. I can see why people would be doing that. I might pass and look for something a little bit out of the box, but not bad. And if we're going to 2 trades, get Zorko out as well and trade in Burgess. It does make a lot of money. That's actually really clever. All right, so trade assist just after open, not the best. We'll quickly hit an F5 and just see if we've got what other people are doing with the players I've got. No, it hasn't got the popular trade ins and outs displayed yet. Okay, so for me, I think Wilson out looks like that's potentially a go. So let's talk about rookies that could be coming in this week. So you've got Joel Freya, who's been playing half back at the Dogs. Interesting one to consider. It looks like I think Bramble got moved into the forward line a bit for that game. So his role might be okay. Karma's obviously got dropped as well. So yeah, like he's an option. The other one here is Richards from the Pies, mature age rookie. He's looked good. He's kicked a goal in both games so far. A bit lively. Elliott's out for an extended period of time, so I think Richards might have some decent job security. So they're probably the two ones that I'm looking at. We should probably just keep an eye ahead on rookies that have played one game as well, and we'll just check the break evens here just to make sure I haven't missed anyone. One gamers. Will Dawson played but wasn't particularly great. McMullen. Where was Phillips? I thought Phillips was okay. Has he already played 2 games? Am I missing something? Oh. Why isn't he in here? No. Oh, it's because it's looking at forwards only. You know what? I'm a dumber. I'm a duffer, a dummy, whatever. Let's have a look in here. Sorry. Break even. Super break even. Yeah. So Richards, Vicentini, obviously, but I just worry about him holding with Sweet in there. Yeah, Freya. Sam Day had a pretty good game. That's true. Sexton, low break even. We can talk about him as a trading option. I think he's probably too expensive. Spoiler. I could go late on Bruce, who had another decent game, 73. McAuliffe I wouldn't be touching. Sullivan's already gone up in price. And then you have Phillips, okay, 64. So I think that's probably the best the one gamers so far would be Phillips. And he's at that basement 102 price, which is pretty handy. He's really our only option next week if we want to fix up or do trades. All right. So we're probably trading Wilson down to... I think Richards has the better job security from what I've heard, even though Fraser's role probably has better scoring potential. So let's get that one done. Leaves me 382k, which is a fair bit of money. So what do we need in this side? We definitely need to fix up defense still. Oh, they've moved Fisher into the forward line for me when I probably need him in defense. All right, I'm going to have to play around with this in a second. So who are the trading options I think I could consider? So Stewart's probably a no. He's just had another pretty poor game. Has not looked amazing. So I think that's probably a no, which means I'm maybe looking at someone like Houston, who potentially a bit fortunate to hit this 148, given he had 3 goals. Could have had a fourth, to be honest. But his break even's back at 97, so that's one I could consider. North matchup, then Carlton, who's had a big game on it. Did he kick a game winner against them as well, like he did Essendon? 578 is more dear though. In the mid, as I mentioned, I still need Sarong, but he's up at 677k now that 150 combined with those couple of other good scores have worked their way through his scoring system. So I feel like I'm priced out a little bit. I'm not sure I really want to pay 677,000 for him. Could we go at Davies Uniacke at 550? That's pretty cheap. Nope, that's Alex Davies, not Uniacke, but I don't think I will do this. He's probably just had his best game for the year. Port's a tougher matchup. Some of these other ones are nice for mids, but I don't think I'll go there. And the forward line, like Rain Kim is an option that makes a lot of sense this week, but he's injured now. So I definitely would have considered him. He's getting, like, his role is just really, really good at the moment. So what do I do with this other trade? Like we could look at more speculative options. We've got Richards. Um, he's been playing midfield with Libra out, and obviously he's had two pretty big scores now, 163 and a 118. I'm not sure I trust him particularly. I don't need a ruck. Mm. So like, I guess I could trade like Graham out. It doesn't get me uh to wrong money, but I could trade him out for like a Houston or something like that. This might make sense. This is pretty vanilla. This is one up, one down, standard stuff. I was hoping to hold on to Graham until he returned or came back, but maybe that's just not likely at the moment. Ooh, Rao's pretty cheap. 566. That's good price for Rao. And I think against the Blues that like to play that contested inside style, he'd match up well. Although this says not so much. His last three against him is not particularly great. And then has Essendon, and then Saints, and then shares that by. Okay, so like Houston, Rao. I mean, Rao should outscore Houston, you'd imagine. Houston, Rao. I think those both seem like interesting targets. Dunkley has the same problem where he's about to have the bye, so I wouldn't go there. Steele, no way. Yeah, like as I said, I think he's injured still, despite yeah, Petrarca hasn't bounced back. This is actually really tricky. So I'm curious as to which premiums people are saying that they want to jump on this week. It's obviously always gets a little bit funny with Byron coming up. I don't think I want to double downgrade, but at the same time, so Darcy doesn't make sense to trade out. Dempsey I could, but I feel like it doesn't really make a whole bunch of sense to trade out. Fife could be, but once again, I don't think it makes much sense. If anything, I'd like to have him as cover and just be able to loop his scores on. McKercher I want to hold. Graham, if he doesn't get another game, I think there's a. I was kind of hoping they'd get smashed last week by the Cats and he'd come back in, but I think that's looking less likely now. And then Closy's got probably one more week in the team. Just with this poor score now filtered in, he's got one more week where that 105 is in. So 31 break even, which he'll hit, and then he should top out after this week. Which means he'd be trade next week for Phillips, which I think makes sense. And then the week after it'd be like Phillips and Reed bench. McKercher comes on. I have McKercher and probably Dempsey here. That finish. Sorry, McKercher and Houston in defense. That finishes up the defense. Midfield we have two spots left, and that would be for Rao, which I could go this week, I guess, and Sarong probably. Rao and Sarong would make sense as these two, and then really like if you move Flanders and Fife down to the forward line, it's finished. But Fife you want to push out, I think, pretty quickly. Okay, so I think like one trade is done in Wilson to Richards, although that could be Fraser. And then I think the other trade is like, who do I move out from these for a premium? If Graham's out this week again, it's probably Graham, and we're looking at, I guess, a Rowell or a Houston. If he's not, like if he's in, I think that's much more difficult. I'm not actually sure what I would do in that situation, so we'll just see what happens. I mean, it could be Dempsey's time to go potentially, even though he can make more money with this 42 break even. It's not heaps more money. He's done his job, so it could be a Dempsey that we move on potentially. Move like a Fife or Flanders back into the forward line and bring someone else on. I'm a little bit worried about the likes of Darcy this week, so we'll just set up the side a little bit against the Swans, who are harder for forwards to score, and we saw it a little bit with Kerno and Mackay last week. I think Kerno junked his way to a decent score. But yeah, so a little bit worried about Darcy this week, so we would love to loop his score this week with Livingston. I don't think Garcia is coming back. Clark may get another game, probably not. Uh, and then McAuliffe could get another game. They've continued to get more injuries, so maybe McAuliffe gets E out of desperation. Hopefully Reed is back, or McKirch. Well, hopefully McKirch is back. But I don't think that's likely at the moment. And then vice captain, captain. Let's talk through those. So I don't like the Swans as a matchup to target into for Bont, even though this is probably the type of matchup he does go better where the game's potentially closer and he has to lift and carry the side. I think Dacos has to be considered every week at the moment. Frio don't really tag. They can use Hayden Young to do defensive stuff on Dacos, and they might, but beyond that, yeah, not really sure. I wouldn't touch anyone from the Carlton Gold Coast game. I mean, maybe you could consider a Walsh type, but I just think that Gold Coast Suns have been like sucking up so many points that I personally would probably avoid that matchup. Then yeah, Northport. I think you can consider Butters again, but he might get the Shields attention that Merritt did this week. Although I still think it makes more sense for teams to go after Horn Francis than it does Butters, despite what Butters has done the last couple of weeks. GWS Geelong have been pretty weak with their midfield, so I think Green should have a good game, but he's very hard to trust as a captain, vice captain option at the moment. Merritt against Richmond, I think, has to be considered for sure. They just give up points to transition. We've seen almost every good captain score come against them, and Merritt's last two against them are a 162 and a 150. So I feel like he has to be in consideration for either VC or C this week. And my philosophy tends to be to try and put the vice captain on the player you actually want to captain. So that would be Merritt for me that I try and vice. But I don't want to miss out on Dacos as a potential one here. Brisbane Hawks, if you have Dunkley or Neil, I guess you could consider them. And then you've got Melbourne Saints. I probably wouldn't be touching anyone there. Maybe like a Gorn. I don't know what his track record's like against Marshall, but he's now had like 3 110s in a row. It's not good history against Marshall. So don't think we'd be looking there. And Adelaide against West Coast, but you could be going potentially like a Dawson type. I think there's a chance that ends up being a pretty close game. Dawson doesn't have the best track record, and you're kind of guessing at what they do with the midfield with Rankin gone. Oh, maybe it's like Zorko C, like Merritt vice captain into Zorko captain. That's so gross. But what's Zorko's 3 round average now? Like 140, 146, 5 round of 125. So maybe it's Merritt into Zorko, or like a Dacos into a Zeret. I like, or even like Butters into Merritt. They're probably the ones I'd be considering this week. Okay, I think that's everything. We'll sit on this other trade and we'll see what happens with it. But with 380k in the bank, I've probably got to make a move to try and continue to get these rookies off and put up some competitive scores. But yeah, looping Darcy this week with a Dempsey or a Richards, I think makes sense. Hopefully Reed's back. We need some rookies to help us cover through the buys. I'd like McKercher to be back, but I don't want them to rush it. So if his foot needs one more week, then I'll just wait until he's back after his buy and use him through it. I think he's going to be a pretty handy option. That's me for the week. I hope you had a better week than me. Probably not hard, to be honest. I know a lot of people have, but it's always good to see the community doing well, and I hope they are. As always, I will see you in the next one. Peace.